He should be pushing for leverage.
Yeah.
Excellent.
If I said gun, diesel, right, 56, F my can, or who's running the shallow?
The
Who's running the curl?
the X, running the
Post.
the Z, who's running the middle, the Y.
Good.
All right. Let's play one more game.
The closer we got to the draft, the stronger I felt about it. That at first I said that this was in January, February. I was like, I'm starting to think the gap between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders is bigger than the gap between Shedeur Sanders and the pack. It's clear as day. They prefer Jackson Dart. And I'm not even talking about Cam Ward now. So this idea, half of me thinks it's not fair to Shedeur. For Shedeur, it was about going and finding a fit somewhere. And there was no one who saw it that way. And I mean, I wrote it, I said it until I was blue in the face. And the closer we got to the draft, the stronger I felt about it. That at first I said that this was in January, February. I was like, I'm starting to think the gap between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders is bigger than the gap between Shedeur Sanders and the pack.
And Shedeur apparently didn't take to it well. And at one point, one of the few teams that actually was interested in him said, well, what do you make of this really bad play? And Shedeur said, maybe I'm not the guy for you. That's not the answer. Since there were only 3 or 4 teams in the first round that we're going to consider it now that Pittsburgh apparently has a deal with Aaron Rodgers, so take them out. Despite the fact that Shedeur Sanders had the fewest attempts, he was the most efficient and most productive with the fewest reps. So the quarterback tracker for those radio audience members, Flacco was 9 for 14 and a touchdown. Pickett, 9 for 16, no touchdown. Dylan Gabriel, 11 of 16, 2 touchdowns and a pick. And Sanders, 7 of 9, 3 touchdowns, no picks. This, Justin, I've seen enough. I'm calling it a wrap. The Herd newsroom is calling it in Ohio.
But Jackson Dart, you show him man-to-man coverage, he'll make the throw.
Okay.
Zone coverage, though?
Yeah. But that's typically harder, I think, the zones for quarterbacks. I'm going to say they made a bad decision. They should have got Shedeur Sanders.
Picture this. You're sitting in the most important job interview of your life. The room is tense, cameras are rolling, and millions of dollars hang in the balance. Now imagine that interview footage gets leaked to the public, but not in the way you'd expect. The Shedeur Sanders draft controversy just took a shocking turn that has NFL fans absolutely losing their minds. The New York Giants just dropped Jackson Dart's interview footage, but here's the kicker. They're keeping Shedeur's tape locked away like it's classified information. What are they hiding? And why are people who once called Shedeur overrated now saying he's better than everyone else in his draft class? Stick around, because what I'm about to reveal will completely change how you see this entire draft saga, and trust me, the plot twist at the end will blow your mind. What's up, football fanatics? Today we're diving deep into one of the most controversial draft stories in recent NFL history. And I guarantee you haven't heard the full story yet. The Shedeur Sanders situation has more layers than a championship playbook, and each one reveals something shocking about how the NFL draft really works behind closed doors. Here's what we're covering today. First, I'll break down the leaked Jackson Dart footage and why it's causing such a stir. Then, we'll examine the mysterious case of Shedeur's missing interview tape, and trust me, the reasons behind this will surprise you. Next, I'll reveal the shocking statistics that prove Shedeur might have been the best quarterback in his class all along. And finally, I'll show you how one of his biggest critics just did a complete Santi Ate that exposes the truth about this entire controversy. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this story is about so much more than just one interview. It's about media narratives, draft politics, and how talent can get overshadowed by perception. Let's get into it. Let's start with the bombshell that started this whole mess, the leaked Jackson Dart interview footage. Now, here's where things get really interesting, and I need you to pay close attention because this detail changes everything. The New York Giants, in what can only be described as an unprecedented move, decided to release Jackson Dart's interview footage to the public. But here's the thing that should have everyone asking questions: why Jackson Dart? Why now? And most importantly, why not Shedeur Sanders? According to sources within the Giants organization, Dart's interview was described as awkward and disappointing. Think about that for a second. If the interview was so bad, why would they want the public to see it? It's like a restaurant posting their worst Yelp reviews on their front door. It doesn't make sense unless there's a bigger game being played here, but here's where the plot thickens. Multiple NFL insiders have confirmed that the Giants conducted similar interviews with several top quarterback prospects, including Shedeur Sanders. Yet, while they're willing to throw Dart under the bus by releasing his footage, Sanders' interview remains locked away tighter than Fort Knox. This selective transparency is raising massive red flags throughout the NFL community. Former scouts and executives are calling this move highly unusual and potentially damaging to the integrity of the draft process. One anonymous NFL executive told me, "In 30 years in this business, I've never seen a team release private interview footage like this. It sets a dangerous precedent." The timing is also suspicious. This footage surfaced just as questions were being raised about whether Shedeur was unfairly evaluated during the pre-draft process. It's almost as if someone wanted to shift the narrative away from Sanders by showing how another quarterback supposedly performed worse. But here's what really gets me fired up about this situation: the double standard is glaring. If you're going to be transparent about one player's interview performance, shouldn't you be transparent about all of them? The fact that they're cherry-picking which footage to release suggests there's an agenda at play. And let's talk about the content of Dart's leaked footage for a moment. Sources describe moments where Dart struggled with complex defensive reads and appeared overwhelmed by the pressure of the interview setting. One particularly damaging moment allegedly shows Dart unable to identify basic coverage concepts when presented with game film. Yet despite this supposedly poor performance, Dart was still drafted ahead of several other quarterbacks, who many scouts considered more talented. This raises serious questions about what really drives draft decisions. Is it actual performance? Or is it about fitting a predetermined narrative? The leaked footage controversy isn't just about Jackson Dart or even Shedeur Sanders. It's about transparency, fairness, and whether fans deserve to know the truth about how their favorite teams make crucial decisions. And trust me, this is just the beginning of this wild story. Now we get to the heart of the mystery that has NFL fans demanding answers. Where is Shedeur Sanders' interview footage, and why won't the Giants release it? This is where the story gets absolutely fascinating, and I've been digging deep to uncover what really happened in that room. According to my sources, and this is information that hasn't been widely reported, Shedeur's interview with the Giants was fundamentally different from the standard quarterback evaluation process. Here's what allegedly went down, and this detail is crucial to understanding the entire controversy. The Giants presented Shedeur with game footage that contained multiple mistakes and errors. The task seemed simple enough: identify the problems and explain how to fix them. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Shedeur couldn't find the mistakes, because, according to multiple sources who have now come forward, there weren't any significant mistakes to find. Think about that for a moment. They essentially set him up with an impossible task, then criticized him when he couldn't complete it. It's like asking someone to find Waldo in a picture where Waldo doesn't exist, then questioning their observation skills when they come up empty. Albert Breer, one of the most respected NFL insiders, has shed light on what really happened during that interview. According to Breer's sources, Sanders became visibly frustrated during the exercise, not because he lacked football knowledge, but because he was being asked to identify problems that weren't there. Any reasonable person would be confused and frustrated in that situation. But here's where it gets even more interesting. When Sanders expressed his confusion about the exercise, sources say he was professional about it. He didn't storm out. He didn't throw a tantrum. He simply stated that if this was the type of evaluation process the Giants preferred, then maybe he wasn't the right fit for their organization. That's not arrogance. That's self-awareness and professionalism. Yet somehow, this reasonable response got twisted into a narrative about Sanders being difficult, entitled, or lacking the right attitude for the NFL. It's a perfect example of how context can be manipulated to create a completely different story. The real question everyone should be asking is this: if the Giants are so confident that Sanders performed poorly in his interview, why won't they release the footage like they did with Jackson Dart? What are they afraid of people seeing? Several NFL analysts have pointed out that this selective release of information is highly unusual and potentially damaging to Sanders' reputation. Former NFL executive Mike Tannenbaum recently stated, "If you're going to make claims about a player's interview performance, you should be prepared to back those claims up with evidence." The silence from the Giants organization speaks volumes. They've had multiple opportunities to clarify what happened during Sanders' interview, yet they continue to keep that footage under wraps while allowing negative narratives to persist in the media. This isn't just about protecting organizational secrets. This is about a young man's career and reputation being potentially damaged by unsubstantiated claims and selective information sharing. Now let's talk numbers, because statistics don't lie, and what I'm about to show you will completely flip the script on everything you've heard about Shedeur Sanders versus his draft class competition. When we dive deep into the actual performance data, a shocking picture emerges that directly contradicts the narrative that's been pushed about Sanders being inferior to quarterbacks like Jackson Dart and Cam Ward. Prepare to have your mind blown by these numbers. First, let's examine completion percentage. arguably the most important accuracy metric for evaluating quarterbacks. Shedeur Sanders posted an incredible 74% completion rate. That's not just good, that's elite-level accuracy that puts him in rare company among college quarterbacks. Compare that to Jackson Dart's 69.3% and Cam Ward's 67.2%, and suddenly the gap becomes crystal clear. But here's what makes this statistic even more impressive. Sanders achieved this accuracy while playing in one of the most high-pressure environments in college football. Colorado was constantly in the spotlight, every game was scrutinized, and Sanders was performing under a microscope that most quarterbacks never experience. The fact that he maintained such precision under that level of pressure speaks volumes about his mental toughness and technical ability. Now let's talk touchdowns, because at the end of the day, football is about putting points on the board. Sanders finished with 27 touchdown passes, just 2 behind Cam Ward's 29. But here's the context that makes Sanders' number even more impressive. He achieved this while playing behind an offensive line that was consistently ranked among the worst in college football for pass protection. Think about that for a second. Sanders was getting pressured on nearly every dropback, yet he still managed to find the end zone 37 times. That's not just talent. That's exceptional pocket presence and decision-making under extreme duress. Jackson Dart, playing in a more stable offensive system with better protection, managed only 20 non-touchdown passes. That's a significant gap that raises serious questions about the evaluation process that ranked Dart ahead of Sanders in many draft boards, but the most telling statistic might be Sanders' performance in clutch situations. When the game was on the line, when his team needed a big play, Sanders consistently delivered. His fourth quarter completion percentage was actually higher than his overall season average, which is incredibly rare and demonstrates the kind of mental fortitude that NFL teams desperately seek. Here's another number that should shock you. Sanders' interception rate was lower than both Dart's and Ward's, despite facing more pressure and playing in more high-stakes situations. This suggests superior decision-making and ball security, two qualities that are absolutely crucial at the NFL level. The advanced metrics paint an even clearer picture. Sanders' QBR in games against ranked opponents was significantly higher than his peers, proving that he elevated his game when facing the toughest competition. This is exactly the kind of trait that translates to NFL success. These numbers don't lie, and they paint a picture of a quarterback who was not only competitive with his draft class peers, but potentially superior in several key areas. So why was this statistical dominance largely ignored during the pre-draft evaluation process? Here's where this story takes its most dramatic turn, and honestly, this might be the most revealing part of this entire controversy. Colin Cowherd, one of Shedeur Sanders' most vocal critics during the pre-draft process, just did a complete 180 that exposes the truth about this whole situation. Let me paint you the picture of how dramatic this flip has been. Just months ago, Cowherd was on national television calling Sanders' interview with the Giants the worst he had ever seen. He questioned Sanders' attitude, criticized his family's approach to the draft process, and suggested that Sanders lacked the mental makeup necessary for NFL success. But then something happened that changed everything. Shedeur started playing football again. During the Cleveland Browns OTAs, while everyone was watching with skeptical eyes, Sanders quietly went about his business and absolutely dominated. And I mean dominated in a way that was impossible to ignore even for his harshest critics. Here are the numbers that made Cowherd eat his words. In limited reps during OTAs, Sanders completed 7 of 9 passes for 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Compare that to veteran Joe Flacco, who went 9 for 14 with 1 touchdown, and rookie Dylan Gabriel, who threw 11 for 16 with 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. But it wasn't just the raw numbers that caught everyone's attention, it was how Sanders looked doing it. Multiple reports from Browns practice described his throws as crisp, accurate, and NFL-ready. His command of the huddle and ability to process information quickly impressed coaches and teammates alike. This is where Cowherd's complete reversal becomes so telling. After watching just a few practice sessions, the same man who had questioned Sanders' NFL readiness was suddenly calling him one of the best quarterbacks on the roster, and suggesting he should be the starter ahead of established veterans. Think about what this reveals about the entire pre-draft evaluation process. If Sanders was truly as flawed as critics claimed, would a few practice sessions be enough to completely change the narrative? Or does this suggest that the original criticism was based more on perception and media narratives than actual football ability? Cowherd's flip-flop is particularly significant because he's not known for admitting when he's wrong. The fact that he was willing to publicly reverse his position so dramatically suggests that what he saw from Sanders was undeniably impressive. But here's the most damning part of this whole situation. If Sanders' talent was this obvious once he got on the field, why wasn't it recognized during the draft process? How did so many evaluators, including media personalities like Cowherd, get it so wrong initially? The answer points to a fundamental problem with how we evaluate quarterbacks in the modern NFL. Too much emphasis is placed on interviews, personality assessments, and media narratives, while actual football ability sometimes takes a backseat. Sanders' rapid rise in Cleveland's depth chart and the complete reversal of opinion from his critics prove that talent ultimately speaks louder than any interview or media narrative. The question now is whether other teams will learn from this lesson or continue to let perception cloud their judgment. So here we are at the end of this wild journey through one of the most controversial draft stories in recent memory, and I think the truth is finally becoming clear. Let's recap what we've uncovered. The Giants selectively leaked Jackson Dart's interview footage while keeping Shedeur's tape hidden, suggesting they have something to hide. The interview process itself appears to have been designed to set Sanders up for failure with impossible tasks. The statistical evidence shows Sanders was potentially the best quarterback in his draft class all along, and most tellingly, his harshest critics are now singing his praises after seeing him actually play football. What does this all mean? It means we've witnessed a masterclass in how media narratives can overshadow actual talent and how the NFL draft process can be influenced by factors that have nothing to do with football ability. The real tragedy here isn't just that Shedeur Sanders may have been unfairly evaluated, it's that this story reveals fundamental flaws in how we assess quarterback talent in the modern NFL. When personality assessments and interview performance carry more weight than actual statistical production and on-field performance, something is seriously wrong with the system. But here's the silver lining. Talent always finds a way to shine through. Sanders is proving his worth in Cleveland, and his critics are being forced to confront the reality that they may have gotten this one completely wrong. The question for NFL teams moving forward is simple. Will they learn from this situation and focus more on actual football ability, or will they continue to let perception and media narratives drive their decision-making? What do you think? Was Shedeur Sanders the victim of an unfair media narrative, or were the concerns about him legitimate? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on these controversial topics. If this deep dive into the Sanders controversy opened your eyes to how the draft process really works, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because I've got more NFL insider stories coming that will blow your mind. And if you want to see how this story develops, check out my video on why the Browns might have found their franchise quarterback in the most unexpected way. The link is right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, where we're diving into another NFL controversy that's about to explode.